hopefully all you guys can see Raven on a chart here, just trading away. So as I was saying earlier, when you guys couldn't see anything, now I've got two instances of Raven on the chart, and they're both running two different simple strategies. Raven on the bottom here, it's looking for two bars in the same direction, and then it takes a trade on the second, or actually, after on the third bar, really, right? You have to wait for the second bar to close, and then Raven takes the position, and then the copy of Raven on the top here, it's just looking for price to reverse. So whenever price reverses, it's throwing a trade in there. So I just created a quick whipsaw type strategy. So every once in a while I'll leave this up, just kind of testing out Raven's robustness, and I've never had any problems yet. So it's been a great improvement that Jeremy's managed to put together here. So I have not had Raven, I've not had NinjaTrader disable Raven yet. So even with all this whipsaw action and what I'm really trying to do is get the stops hit at the same exact moment that Raven wants to submit orders as well, or try and cancel those stops and submit an order and have a stop hit. Three actions going at the same time. Because that's what NinjaTrader was having a problem with, and so far everything looks pretty rock solid with it. But what I was saying earlier is you can see the entry flags here, right? So Raven shows you the entry flags for its orders. All right, so we have two different entry flags for the two different Ravens, and of course you can see the different stops for each Raven. And then over here on the gray panel, you can see this is NinjaTrader's chart trader, and it shows an averaged entry price and a total number of contracts at that average price, as well as of course you can see the the stop and target flags there. So it's kind of fun, interesting stuff. So all right, well, with that, let me get to Robert's question here. So what sometimes will happen, so what Robert is getting is Robert's getting a deserial an XML deserialization error with Raven. And let me pull up my workspace here, and all right, there's my chart. All right, so what I'm going to do is to fix these deserialization errors. Actually, first let me I'll show you how they get started. All right, so you're probably all familiar with, if you go into your indicator list, right, and like let me select my EM, well actually no, I'll select my BloodHound here. So you can do this with any indicator, right, BloodHound or any other indicator, right? If you right click on this panel here, you get the set default, right, the set default, right? I can do the same thing for the EMA. If I right click, I get the set default for whatever the indicator is. And if I pull up my strategies, let me throw a Raven on here. So if I have a strategy on here, right, I can do the same thing. If I right click, I get this set default. So what happens is if your indicator is updated, or if your strategy is updated, and any of these parameters change with that update, what happens is this set default gets outdated, and NinjaTrader doesn't know how to handle the difference between what's in this set default file. So this actually creates a file when you do this set default. It creates a file. And NinjaTrader doesn't know how to handle the difference between the update and that file that was created with an old version. So let me show you how to clear that out. So I've got a quick link here that takes me straight into my NinjaTrader 7 folder here. And so when you're in there, you want to go into templates. You'll see this templates folder. And of course you'll see your BloodHound templates are inside of this folder here. So those are all the BloodHound files that I've made over the last year and a half. And you'll also see there's an indicator folder down here. So if let me go into that indicator folder, and so there isn't one for BloodHound. So let me show you what happens here. Actually, let me shrink this up. So I just brought up my indicator window, and I'm going to select BloodHound, and I'm going to make a default. I'm going to set a default here. And as soon as I do that, you see it created a file in this folder here. So remember, this folder is inside NinjaTrader 7, templates, and then the indicator folder. And so what happens is this file is what's causing those XML errors after an update. So all you got to do is just delete that file, and that fixes the XML error. And so in Robert's case, Robert's having a problem with Raven. So Robert, you want to go to your strategy folder. So inside of templates, there's a strategy folder. You'll see I don't have any in there, but I can make one real quick. So let me open up my strategies again, and I'll drop Raven down there. And I'm going to right click and set a default for Raven. And if I do that, you see it just created this Raven file inside my strategy folder. And so all you have to do is delete that file, and that gets rid of that XML error that you're having. So I would highly suggest that you don't set these defaults for Raven or BloodHound, because what might happen is if you have a BloodHound file loaded in here, and then you set a default, well, that could cause problems, because what happens if you go and you delete the file that you had specified? Then what happens is NinjaTrader is going to try and load that file into Raven, and if that file is deleted, then it really causes problems there. So I suggest that you really don't use the set default feature, but if you really have to, make sure you do it without a file loaded. Make sure this template parameter here is set to unnamed. Make sure there's no file in here. And so then if you always want to do some testing with 5 contracts or something like that, then make sure, and you always want to use a, whatever, I don't know, 15 tick stop, and you want to have these 2 parameters always set like this, and then set yourself a default. Just make sure that this is empty right here. Okay, so I think that ought to addresses Robert's question. And let me go through some of these other comments here. All right, so a bunch of people can now see. That's good. So Tony's saying you missed last week. So Tony, last week's webinar is up on YouTube, so you can watch it now. The recordings of these workshops always go up on YouTube first. So it is up on YouTube for sure. So John is asking, how do we find the latest BloodHound video on YouTube? All right, I'll show you that. And actually, that was a part of last week's video. So let me open up my web browser here, and I'll go to Shark Indicators, go to our home page, and under support, I'm going to go to support, and then down here to learn BloodHound, and then down here to the training workshops. All right, so you'll see a list of the most recent 8 workshops right here on the right-hand column, and then you'll see this link right here to watch the recorded webinars. So I'm going to click on that link, and so you'll see that the last one I updated was from the 18th, and I still haven't actually posted the one from the 25th, but it is on YouTube, and I'll show you how to get there. Obviously, you can just open up another tab and go to YouTube, or here's another way. So what I can do is I'll open up this video, and you'll see the YouTube player. They have a link right here to YouTube. So that's usually how I get there. Right, so that opened up, you can see that opened up YouTube right there. And from there, you can click on our channel here. So you see the name here. So if I click on this name, it will take me to our channel here with all of our videos on it. Let me turn that introduction off. So you can see right here, YouTube lists the recent uploads. And so this one says 4 days ago. So I'm assuming, let's see, yep, allowing a specific number of trades per direction. So this is actually last week's video right here. So I'm going to hit the back button and go back. You know, so you can see them in, you can see all the videos in chronological order, all right, by going through the recent uploads here. Then it looks like YouTube provides, you know, which videos are the most popular, ones that are watched the most on here. And if you're looking for you know, a particular condition or a particular solver, you know, YouTube has a great search tool. So you can use their search tool. Just type in BloodHound workshop, and then type in something like the support and resistance, and we'll see what pops up here. Yeah, so, you know, popped up with the support resistance solver, part 1, and it did it to me again. I don't know why, but YouTube plays a video in the background that I just can't find where it's coming from. It's just so bizarre. So anyways, I'll just try and ignore the music going on in the background there. So you can see it pulled up a couple of workshops here with the support resistance solver. So I'm going to kill that. Okay, so there you go, John. So with that, what I'm going to do is jump over here and start working on Julie's question. So Julie wanted to know how to, let me bring the question up here. Julie wants to use a momentum oscillator on price to show overbought oversold situations. And so one of the indicators she had suggested I use was just the simple stochastics. So let me put the stochastics on here, and let's see if anybody else has any other suggestions for another type of momentum oscillator. I'd be glad to kind of give two examples on two different oscillators. So let me I'm going to throw the MACD on here, or actually, well, we also have just the momentum indicator, and where's the MACD? There we go. There's the MACD. All right, so I got three different indicators here on the chart, and let me change our momentum one here, make it a little easier to see. All right, I think this will work for now. So I'm going to shrink these other two indicators, and we'll start with the stochastics. And I'm going to make these lines a little easier to see. All right, good. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll build a simple condition here, looking for when the stochastics is in the oversold area, right, is marked by the red dashed line, so that's in the 20 area, and we'll look for when the stochastics is in the overbought area, above 80, and then I'll move on to some of these other indicators here. So you can see I already have BloodHound on the chart, and right now it's giving us feedback, right, just based on this comparison solver that I threw on here, and I didn't complete it. So let me I'm going to go through and delete that. And one thing to note, that I deleted that 30-minute chart on here, and you can see that BloodHound is telling me I need to press F5 to update the chart. So whenever you add a secondary chart into BloodHound, you have to hit F5 on your chart so that it loads that data up. So you have to get NinjaTrader to load that data up into BloodHound. And the same thing happens when you remove a secondary time frame. All right, so I'm going to start from scratch again here. And the first thing that we want to do is, give a name to our BloodHound system. And for these workshops, I have a naming convention here. So I'm just going to grab one of these old names and just change the date on the name. All right, 11/1 looks good. All right, so now that I've got this name here, now I can get started. Oops, I accidentally put the BHT in there. Let me get rid of that. I'm going to delete that BHT. There we go. Okay, that looks better. All right, so look for this overbought and oversold condition, and I'm going to change the scaling on my stochastics indicator. There we go. So now we can see all the way from 0 all the way up to 100 on the scaling for the indicator here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the comparison solver, and we're going to compare, the stochastic plot against the 80 and the 20, those fixed values there. And for this one, I'm going to use the threshold solver because I can do both values, both the 20 value and the 80 value with one solver. I could also use the comparison solver. Right, I could use this comparison solver, but I would need a comparison solver. I'd need one comparison solver for looking at the 20 value and a second comparison solver to look at the 80 value, right? Because it only has these two inputs here, indicator A and indicator B inputs. But the threshold solver, right, it allows me to put in 5 different fixed threshold values. So I can put in 80 here, and I can put 20 here. And one thing to note about the threshold solver is your values have to go in descending order. So I can't have zeros in the middle here if I do this. So I had to put some kind of intermediary value here. So I'm going to put like 50, since 50 is in the middle. So actually, how about if I just do this? Let me start off by just doing this. So we can progress through this. So this is in descending order, right? 80, 20, and zeros at the bottom. So another way of thinking that you have to put the values in here is you have to, on E has to be the lowest value that you're looking at, right? So if we're looking at an indicator that has negative numbers, like the CCI goes into -100, and I want to look at a -100, and that's my lowest value, then I have to put the -100 down here, and then put the higher numbers above it. Right? So let's keep that in order. Keep that in mind, that these values have to be in descending order like this. And so then the next step is we have to set up our outputs correctly. And you can see that when you start putting values in here, that the description of each output parameter will change. So it'll give you a description. So when we're at 80 or greater, if I put a 1 in here, we'll get a 1 out of this solver, or we'll get a signal out of this solver when we're at 80 or greater. And oh, first thing I need to do is change my indicator. I kind of got ahead of myself here. So the reason why why the BloodHound's output is all green for a long signal is because we're looking at the SMA. And so obviously the SMA value of our SMA is greater than 80, right? Because oil right now is at 95. So let me switch this over to the stochastics. And so there's our stochastics. I just double-clicked on the indicator, or you can use the add button to drop it down here. And I'm just using the default 7, 14, and 3 parameters, periods. And we do want to analyze, I'm looking at the D plot. And so I'm going to leave the K-plot alone here. So we're all good there with our plots. Hit OK. And there we go. There's the correct output that we're looking for. And so when we're using the threshold in this fashion here, just simply looking at 80, 20, right, you can see the output looks almost just like the indicator. And one thing you'll note, you can see that right in this area in here, right, there is no output from the threshold solver. And that's when, see if I put my crosshair here, what you can see is that's because the indicator dropped below 20. So it dropped below 20 and now there's no output. And that's because when we're at 20, our output for the longs is set to 0. And also when the stochastic is at 0, the output for longs is set to 0. So as soon as our stochastic gets down to 20, we told it to give us an output of 0. And that's what's happening right up here in BloodHound's output. So you can see we can use it in this fashion, and we kind of get this neat analog looking feedback. And so the next thing we want to do is what we're looking for is that when our stochastic is below 20, right, we're looking for a short output. And so if I put a 1 there, and also you'll notice it's not quite right. So look, when I only set the at 20 to 1, you'll notice we get a signal here right when the indicator is at 20. But when the indicator goes even lower, when it approaches 0, you'll notice that the long output begins to diminish, or the output of the long side begins to go back to 0. And that's because we left this at 0 to 0. So what we're saying is when the stochastic approaches the 0 threshold, we want our output to become 0. So as our stochastic indicator approaches the 0 threshold down here, the threshold's output begins to approach 0. So what we need to do is put a 1 in here. So now what's happening is when our stochastic is at 20, or even when it's at 0, or when the stochastic value is anywhere in between 0 and 20, our solver is giving us a signal on the output side. And so now you see that now we're getting a correct output here. And you'll notice that when the indicator just popped above the 20 level, we're still getting a signal, but if you look closely, right, the value is beginning to diminish. And you'll see further on down here, when the stochastic gets high enough, eventually there's no short signal anymore. Right? And so that's the fuzzy logic feedback from BloodHound doing this. And that's due to the threshold level. Right? So this 0.8 threshold level that BloodHound is set to is what determines when we get the racing stripes across the whole chart and when we don't. So let me tell you what, I'm gonna darken up the threshold values here on BloodHound so you can see them better. So what I just did is I opened up NinjaTrader's indicator window, and it's already set to BloodHound. And in the lines section here, you can see we have a long threshold and a short threshold under the lines. So I'm going to change these colors and make them a little easier to see. So how about hot pink? I'll make them a little thicker. And I'm going to change this green to lawn green. Let's make that a little thicker and set this to dash. There we go. So now we can see our threshold values a little better. Right? You can see that whenever the output of BloodHound exceeds that threshold, that's when we get the racing stripe that paints the whole chart. And so that's marking our signal. And so let's do some other, let's look at some other ways that we can control this output here from the threshold solver. So there's some other things that we can do here. And the first thing I want to do is, I haven't quite answered Julie's question exactly, because Julie's actually wanting the opposite, wants the opposite signals here. So Julie actually wanted a short, she wanted to mark a short condition when the momentum indicator, or oscillator I should say, is in the overbought. So she wants a short condition when our oscillator is in the overbought condition, and she wants a long signal when we're in the oversold condition here. So to do that, I'm going to set my outputs back to 0 on everything, and I just simply need to reverse my outputs in a way. So we want a short output when our stochastic is at 80 or greater. So when our stochastic is in the overbought condition, that's when we want a short signal. So there we go. And then for the long, there we go. So we want a long output when we're in the oversold area. So this is more, so this is actually what Julie was asking to find here. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of show some different ways that we can use, some different ways we can set up the threshold values here. So let me clear out the outputs here. So I had started off by actually putting 80 up here and 20 down here. And let me kind of show you why you have to go and why you have to put all these numbers in descending order. So, you know, you might think that, hey, I can just do this and actually, oops, let me reverse these here. So you might just think, oh, you know, great, when we're at 20 or less, I just put a 1 in there for my longs, and when I'm at 80 or more or greater, I can put a 1 in here for the short output. And you can see it works for the short output, but we're not getting any long output. And that's just because these zeros are a lower value than 20. So it's not in descending order. So that's why you have to put it in descending order, because this 20 value is just not going to work correctly. So if I put 50 in the 3 middle thresholds here, now it works, just like magic. And so now you can see, let me mark the 50 line here on our stochastics. All right, so this white line here marks our 50 line, and we can see that whenever our stochastic is above 50, right, we start getting a long output. And then whenever the stochastic crosses below 50, we start getting a long output. And then the stochastic flips up again, and we start getting a short output. Right? And of course, that's based on how our threshold levels are set up here. And once again, if we read the description of our outputs here, right? So when we're at 80 or greater, there's no output for the longs. And when we're at 50, there's still no output. There's a 0 output for the longs. And of course, vice versa for the shorts here. So that's, to me, makes a little more sense when you're using something like the stochastics for setting up this threshold. But let's just say you wanted like a digital type of an output, or you wanted some absolute conditions met here, so you don't want this variable output. Then what we can do is I can set the top two to 80, right? So both A and B are set to 80, and then I can set the bottom two thresholds to 20. And look at that, I cleaned it up nice and clean, and it got rid of the fuzzy logic calculation. So you can see that as soon as our indicator breaks above 80, we're getting a short output. And as soon as the stochastic breaks below 20, we're getting a long output. And so once again, if we look at how our output reads when we're at 80 or greater, right, 0, oops, hold on, let me jump down here. So when we're at 50, there's no output. When we're at 20, there's no output. So in between 50 and 20, we told it we don't want any output, a 0 output. And then when we're at 20 or less, that's when we want an output. So that's how I managed to get this digital type output. Is just essentially you just plug the same threshold in twice, like that. All right, so so now I'll just kind of quickly go through and show how this works on some other indicators here. So let's see, the momentum indicator here. So I can see if I look at the scaling, and the scaling is dramatically different. So I'll use how if I use a value of this 0.1 and negative 0.1 for this. So let me give this a name here. So I'll call that, there's the stochastic, and so what I'm going to do is, no, I'll just start from scratch. Let me just grab another one. Let's start from scratch. All right, so this threshold will be looking at the momentum, or the MOM indicator. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off our solver here for the threshold. And so now we're only looking at the momentum threshold. So let me set this over to the momentum. All right, and I'm just using the 14 period. Let's see. Yep, we can see here I'm just using the 14 period. There's only one plot. So we got our plot selected right. That looks good. And now I just need to put in here the threshold values I want to look at. All right, so when we're at 0.1, how about if I look for a long signal, and when we're at our negative 0.1 or less, I'll look for a short signal. Simple enough. Yeah, so there we go. Pretty simple. I'll just put some lines on here just to mark those threshold values. So, and so we can see with these simple threshold levels that I set, right, we can see we're getting the fuzzy logic or the analog type of output here. And if I want to change it to that digital type look, that cleaner look, all I got to do is put in my values twice, like I did with the stochastics. And there we go, and that kind of cleaned it up. All right, so that was pretty simple enough. And let's take a look at the MACD. So you could use the threshold solver with the MACD as kind of like a trend filtering device. So yes, we'll use the MACD as to build a kind of a trend filtering device. So I'm turning the momentum threshold solver off. So now I'm going to change this over to the MACD. Let me rename this and plug the MACD in here. And you can see the MACD has 3 different plots. And so let's look at the MACD plot first for doing some trend filtering. And the simplest use of the MACD is when it's above 0, right? You're simply in a long situation, right? Momentum is to the upside. And when the MACD is below 0, momentum is to the downside. So we'll just use the 0 line as our directional indicator. And so when we're at A, and A is set to 0, we want a long. So when we're at 0 or greater, we want a long filter. And when we're at 0 or less, we'll look for a short filter. And so simply enough, we can see here when our MACD line is below 0, right, we have this long or short filter. And when the MACD is above the 0 line, we have a long filter. Right? So you could just use this as a very simple filtering tool for part of your system. And if we wanted to use something that moves a little quicker, right, we could use the histogram, right, which are the purple bars here. We could use the histogram to do the same thing. So all I need to do is go back into my MACD indicator, and I could just use the histogram or the difference plot here. And if I do that, now you can see our trend filtering matches, and it's not matching because my MACD, look at this. So my MACD periods in BloodHound aren't matching what's on my chart. So let me set these up to match. I'm going to modify the chart here to match. So it's one thing to keep an eye on. Make sure that, if you have modified values on your indicators on your chart, make sure that the BloodHound periods match up. And there, now it's matching up. So I can see the purple histogram bars, and when they're below 0, we're getting a short filtering, and as soon as they cross above the 0 line, we're getting our long filtering here. So those are some nice, easy trend filtering uses with the threshold solver there. All right. So with that, let me go through some of these comments here and see if anybody gave me any suggestions. So it looks like Jeff is saying, can I use the anistochastic universal? Well, let's see if I have it on here, Jeff. I don't have a whole lot of stuff on here. I have some of them, and sorry, I don't have that one. Yeah, I forget who the author is that makes the ANA stuff, but yeah, I know he's got a whole bunch of indicators out there now, and I have not grabbed those yet. So, Harry, that's right. Harry makes the ANA stuff. Thank you. Oops. Well, sorry about that, Jeff. So let me see if there's any other suggestions here. Nope, doesn't look like any more suggestions came in. All right, well, this was a pretty simple workshop, and hopefully, I think next week I will plan on working up a opening range demonstration again, and so hopefully next week ought to be a nice improvement on the one that I did a while back already. So with that, guys, I will close it up here and wish you guys a good weekend.